From the moment I stepped into the prom hall at 7 p.m., the music thumping through the speakers, lights swirling like galaxies over our heads, I felt this strange mixture of excitement and nervous energy because tonight was supposed to be special, the night I would finally gather the courage to tell Zayn, my quiet, charming, annoyingly perfect crush, how I felt, and my best friend Aisha kept encouraging me, fixing my hair, straightening my dress straps, whispering, "You've got this," while we walked around greeting classmates, laughing at the awkward dance moves some of the guys pulled off, and stopping at the photo booth to take silly pictures. And for the first 30 minutes everything felt normal, just like any other prom, with the DJ hyping the crowd and our group of friends dancing in a big circle, until around 7:35 when I noticed Zayn standing alone near the punch table looking like he was waiting for someone, and Aisha nudged me to go talk to him, but I chickened out and told her I needed a minute because my heart was beating too fast, and we went outside to get some air, walking past couples taking pictures under fairy lights. And as the clock hit 7:45 we went back inside, and that's when the slow song started, the room dimmed to a soft glow, and I finally convinced myself to approach Zayn, rehearsing my lines in my head, whispering under my breath so no one could hear me sound ridiculous, but right when I took my first step, right when I was ready, my entire world froze because out of nowhere I saw Aisha walk up to him, touch his arm and then kiss him, not a friendly peck but a real kiss, under the same lights I had imagined confessing under. And the shock crashed through me so hard that the music faded, the voices blurred, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat turning into thunder. I don't even remember how I moved, but I must have walked out of the hall because suddenly I was outside again, leaning on the railing, trying not to cry in front of the entire venue, thinking over and over, she betrayed me. She actually did this. And my phone buzzed with her messages. Where are you? Please come back. But I ignored everything, letting the minutes crawl past as people walked by laughing, taking pictures, living their perfect prom moments while mine had shattered at 7:53 p.m., and eventually I called my mom to pick me up early, lying to her about a headache because I couldn't even process the humiliation of seeing my best friend kiss the one person she knew I had feelings for, and for the next 2 days I avoided her, turning my phone face down so I wouldn't see her name light up on the screen, replaying the scene in my mind so many times it made me physically sick, and by the third day I felt anger mixing with sadness because this wasn't just about a crush, it was about trust, loyalty, the years of secrets and sleepovers and promises we made, and I kept wondering how long she had liked him, whether everything she said to me about encouraging me was a lie, and on the fourth day I finally checked my phone to see over 40 missed calls and long messages begging me to talk to her, telling me it wasn't what I thought, but I didn't believe a word of it, and by the end of that week I convinced myself our friendship was over, until Saturday at exactly 6:12 p.m. when the doorbell rang and my mom called me from downstairs saying Aisha was here, and I almost told her to send her away, but something inside me, maybe exhaustion, maybe curiosity, made me walk down the stairs, and there she was, standing on my porch with red eyes, messy hair, looking like she hadn't slept properly since prom, and before I could even say anything she blurted out, "Please just listen," her voice cracking, hands shaking, and when she sat on the couch, she started explaining everything from the moment I overheard a group of seniors at prom talking behind the equipment booth around 7:20 p.m. They were bragging about a plan to humiliate me by convincing Zayn to pretend to like me, get me to confess during the slow song, and then reject me in front of everyone while they recorded it for a stupid TikTok trend. And she said she panicked because she tried to find me but I kept moving through the crowd, and when she reached Zayn to warn him some of the seniors were watching, and she needed a distraction so they wouldn't know she ruined their plan, and the only thing she could think of, the only thing quick enough to break their expectations, was to do something shocking, something that made it look like she was the one interacting with him romantically, not me, and she said the kiss wasn't romantic, it wasn't planned, it wasn't something she wanted to do at all. And Zayn himself pulled away immediately because he didn't understand what was happening until she whispered the warning to him, and while she explained this, tears were falling down her face, and I realized she had been dealing with the guilt and fear of losing me this entire week, and the silence in the room felt so heavy that I could hear both our breathing, and part of me still hurt, because the image of the kiss was burned into me, but another part of me knew her heart, knew that she would jump in front of a car for me. And as she kept apologizing I started crying too, because I had spent the entire week assuming the worst instead of trusting someone who had stood by me through every heartbreak, every failure, every stupid school drama. And when I finally reached out to hug her, she broke down completely, burying her face into my shoulder like a child, And we stayed like that for a long time, both crying, both realizing that friendships aren't destroyed by mistakes but by silence, and that trust doesn't mean believing someone is perfect, it means believing they love you enough to tell you the truth even when it hurts. And later that night when she left my house around 8:01 p.m. we promised each other that no misunderstanding, no boy, no rumor would ever come between us again, because prom night didn't break our friendship, miscommunication almost did. And the lesson I walked away with was simple. Sometimes the people who hurt us are the same people fighting hardest to protect us, and sometimes you don't lose a friend, you just learn how strong your friendship actually is. After Aisha left my house at 8:01 p.m., I went back to my room and sat on the floor surrounded by our old photos, birthday parties, school trips, late-night study sessions where we laughed more than we worked, and I realized how close I had come to losing something irreplaceable, and for the next few minutes I just stared at my reflection in the mirror, wondering why it's so easy to trust strangers' actions over a friend's intentions. And around 8:20 my phone buzzed with a message from Zayn asking if we could talk, which sent a whole new wave of nerves through me because even though the misunderstanding with Aisha was resolved, I still didn't know what he thought of everything. So after pacing my room for 5 minutes straight, I finally replied okay, and we agreed to meet at the small park near my house at 8:40, and when I got there the air was cool and the sky had that deep blue, almost purple color right before night fully arrives, and he was already sitting on the swing gently, rocking back and forth like he was trying to calm his own nerves. When he saw me, he stood up immediately, brushing his hands against his jeans and said, "I didn't know about the plan." His voice low but steady, and he explained how shocked he had been when Aisha kissed him, how confused he felt until she whispered the warning, how angry he was at the seniors for using him as part of their stupid prank, and how afterwards he refused to go along with anything and left prom early. And I noticed the sincerity in his eyes, the way he kept looking down because he didn't want me to think he was proud of any of it. And I felt this unexpected wave of relief wash through me. We sat on the swings, letting them sway gently while he told me he always thought I was sweet and fun and a little too nervous for my own good, and that he was actually hoping I'd talk to him that night, and hearing that made my heart twist in this warm, soft way, not because I expected anything more to happen, but because it felt good to know that despite all the chaos, the embarrassment, the hurt, something honest was still there. By the time we stood up and walked back toward the street, it was already past 9 p.m., and we said goodnight with this quiet understanding that no matter what happened next, things were okay, and on my walk home I felt lighter than I had in days, like a heavy fog finally lifted. When I got home, I sent Aisha a voice note telling her I talked to Zayn and that everything was clear now, and she immediately replied with happy crying emojis and "thank you for giving me another chance." And for the rest of the night I lay in bed replaying everything, the prom lights, the heartbreak, the conversations, the truth, and I realized the hour that felt like the worst moment of my teenage life had actually become the moment that strengthened two of my most important relationships, and slowly, with each breath, the pain faded into something gentler, a memory that still hurt a little but taught me something huge. Trust doesn't mean nothing will ever go wrong. Trust means believing that the people who love you will always choose honesty, even when the world is loud with confusion, and that sometimes the scariest misunderstandings lead to the strongest bonds, if you're brave enough to listen and forgive. Over the next few days, life slowly settled back into its usual rhythm, but something inside me felt different, calmer, wiser, like I had aged months in just one dramatic week. And when Monday morning arrived, I walked into school with a strange mixture of nervousness and confidence, wondering if people were still talking about prom, whether the seniors had tried anything else, but to my surprise everything seemed normal. Aisha was waiting for me near the lockers, clutching her books against her chest like they were a shield, and the moment she saw me she gave this tiny hopeful smile that said 100 things without a single word, and instead of speaking, I just walked up and hugged her, long and tight, because some friendships don't need explanations after the healing starts. And as we walked through the hallway side by side, I noticed people looking at us, not with judgment but with curiosity, because rumors had clearly spread but no one knew the truth, and honestly I didn't care anymore because for the first time I realized that not every story that looks ugly from the outside needs defending. Sometimes the people who matter already know the truth and that's enough. At lunch we sat with our usual group, laughing about the weirdest parts of prom, like the principal trying to dance, or the guy whose suit ripped during a spin, and slowly the awkward cloud surrounding us started to dissolve, especially when Zayn walked over to our table, hands in his pockets, smiling shyly as he asked if he could sit with us, And Aisha gave me this subtle little eyebrow raise, like she was teasing me without saying a word, and I kicked her under the table to make her stop, but I couldn't hide the small smile that kept sneaking onto my face. Zayn and I talked more that afternoon than we ever had before, about music, stupid teachers, future plans, and for once I didn't overthink every sentence I said, because something about what happened made me realize that heartbreak isn't always the end of something. Sometimes it's the beginning of clarity, strength, and understanding. After school, as Aisha and I walked home together, she opened up more about how scared she had been of losing me, how she barely slept the night after prom, how she kept watching the door at school that day hoping I'd show up so she could fix things, and hearing all that made me squeeze her hand because the truth was I didn't just forgive her, I admired her for choosing to protect me even if it meant I'd hate her for a moment. By the time we reached my street, the sun was low and golden, casting soft light on everything, and I realized this simple walk felt more meaningful than the entire prom night because it wasn't about the dress or the lights or the music. It was about learning who would stand beside me long after the glitter faded. That evening, while doing my homework, I got a notification from Zayn. "Hey, if you're free later, want to come to the park? I owe you a proper conversation that isn't filled with drama." And even though my heart did that annoying fluttery thing again, I didn't panic this time. Instead, I texted back, "Sure, 7:30 works?" And when I walked into the park later and saw him sitting on the same swing, waiting with a shy smile and 2 cans of soda, I realized that life doesn't give perfect moments. It gives messy ones that turn into perfect memories when the right people are involved. We talked for almost an hour about everything and nothing, our voices blending with the quiet rustle of leaves and the distant sound of kids playing. And at one point he looked at me and said softly, "I'm really glad things worked out." And the sincerity in his tone made my heart warm in a new, gentler way, not like a crush that burns too fast, but like something comfortable and safe. When I finally walked home under the soft streetlights, I understood something deeply. Trust isn't built on grand gestures, it's built on moments. Like these, quiet conversations, honest mistakes, brave apologies, and the choice to believe in people even after things go wrong. And that week, which started with heartbreak, ended with friendship stronger than before and a connection with Zayn that felt real, natural, and maybe even the beginning of something beautiful. But whatever it turned into, I knew one thing for sure. I had survived the chaos, learned from it, and stepped out stronger, with the right people still by my side. Over the next week, everything continued to shift in small, meaningful ways, like life was quietly rearranging itself after the storm. And I started noticing how much more aware I had become of the people around me. How their expressions changed, how their words carried hidden layers I never paid attention to before. And by Wednesday morning, the routine of school felt easier, lighter, especially because Aisha and I were back to our old rhythm of inside jokes, whispered comments during class, and sharing snacks like nothing had ever tried to tear us apart. But we both knew deep down that something fundamental between us had strengthened, like gold filling the cracks after everything broke. Even the seniors who planned that stupid prank avoided eye contact whenever they passed by us in the hallway, like they knew we had figured everything out, and part of me felt empowered by that. Not in a revengeful way, but in a "you didn't break me" kind of way, and that alone felt like victory. After school that day, Aisha and I sat on the bleachers watching the soccer team practice, letting the warm breeze brush against our faces as she talked about her plans for the next school event. And halfway through her story, she paused, nudged me, and teased, "So have you talked to Zayn again?" With that mischievous sparkle in her eyes, and I tried to play it cool, but she could tell from my smile that yes, we had been talking more. Texts late at night about random memes, short conversations between classes, even a few shy moments where our hands brushed by accident, and every time it happened, I felt that soft flutter inside me that wasn't overwhelming anymore, just warm and steady. On Friday evening, Zayn invited both Aisha and me to a small group hangout at the mall, and going there felt like stepping into a new chapter, one where everything wasn't tinted by drama or misunderstanding, and the three of us walked through the bright, noisy food court laughing about the most ridiculous things, like how Aisha nearly tripped over a toddler who was running with a balloon, or how Zayn couldn't decide between fries or nachos so he bought both and ended up spilling cheese on his hoodie. Even the walk back home afterward felt peaceful, with streetlights glowing softly along the empty sidewalks, and at one point Zayn slowed down so he and I fell slightly behind the group, and he said quietly, "I'm really glad things didn't get ruined. I didn't want to lose the chance to know you better." And those simple words stayed replaying in my head long after we parted ways at the corner of my street. Later that night, I sat on my bed scrolling through messages, smiling at the picture we took. Aisha throwing peace signs behind us, Zayn trying to look serious but failing because he was mid-laugh, and I realized something important. Life wasn't giving me a fairy tale love story or flawless friendships, but it was giving me people who showed up, who apologized, who tried, who stayed even after things got messy, and that was so much more real and precious than any perfect prom night could ever be. By the time the weekend rolled around, I felt grounded in a new way, ready for whatever came next, whether it was deeper feelings with Zayn or new adventures with Aisha, because I finally understood that trust isn't something you find, it's something you build, moment by moment, with the people who choose to stand beside you. Even when everything else falls apart, and for the first time in a long while, I went to bed with a heart that felt whole, hopeful, and open to whatever tomorrow would bring. The following week unfolded with a quiet rhythm, each day layered with small moments that felt ordinary but carried an extraordinary weight now that I had learned to notice them. Monday started with the soft sunlight streaming into the classroom as Aisha and I whispered jokes back and forth while pretending to take notes, and I realized how much I missed those tiny, normal moments that no one outside our friendship ever saw, but they were the moments that mattered most. During lunch, Zayn joined us again, and this time the conversation felt effortless, like we were weaving a tapestry of shared stories, silly memories, and dreams about things that seemed impossibly far away, yet in that moment felt tangible and real, and I noticed how my chest no longer tightened with nervousness around him but instead felt this gentle, buoyant warmth, like walking on soft sunlight. After school, Aisha and I walked home together under the golden glow of the late afternoon sun, her arm brushing mine in that casual, familiar way that made me realize I had taken it for granted how comforting it was to have someone who knew me completely, someone who had stayed through the worst misunderstandings, and she looked at me suddenly with a half-smile, half-serious expression and said, "You've changed, you know." And I laughed nervously because I did feel different. I was calmer, stronger, more patient, and more willing to see the good in people even when they messed up. That evening, Zayn texted me asking if I wanted to go for a walk around the neighborhood park, and as we strolled under the canopy of twinkling streetlights, our conversation turned from random chatter to deeper topics: fears, regrets, hopes for the future, and I found myself sharing things I had never told anyone before, about my dreams, my insecurities, even the way I sometimes worried that people would leave me if I wasn't careful, and he listened without judgment, occasionally nodding, occasionally teasing, but mostly just holding space for my words, and I realized that moments like these were far more meaningful than any grand gesture or dramatic confession. By the time we returned to my street, the sky was painted in midnight blues and silvers, and we lingered there for a moment, neither wanting to leave before he quietly said, "I'm glad we're friends, really glad." And I smiled, feeling a sense of security I hadn't known I needed, because trust, I realized, wasn't just about big, dramatic rescues or apologies, it was also built in the silent understanding, the shared laughter, the willingness to keep showing up for someone even when the world made it complicated. Over the next few days, Aisha and I spent time planning a small school event together, and her energy, enthusiasm, and constant support reminded me why our friendship was unshakable, while Zayn's presence became a quiet, comforting rhythm in my life, the kind that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, things could be beautiful without being perfect. And that weekend, as I lay on my bed looking at the photos we had taken over the past 2 weeks, silly faces, candid smiles, moments of chaos turned into laughter, I realized that the heartbreak, the misunderstandings, the confusion of prom night had not destroyed anything. Instead, it had shown me the real value of trust, forgiveness, and patience, and for the first time in a long time, I went to sleep feeling complete, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, the people who truly mattered would always find a way to be there, even if it meant taking a hit themselves. And that lesson, the lesson of friendship, loyalty, and love layered with imperfection, would stay with me forever, shaping how I saw people, relationships, and myself in ways I could never have imagined on that chaotic, unforgettable prom night. The week after prom continued to unfold like a slow, deliberate turning of pages, each day layered with little moments that felt ordinary but carried enormous weight now that I had seen how fragile trust could be. Monday morning started with the soft golden light spilling into the classroom, and as I walked in, I noticed how much more aware I had become of the subtle expressions around me, how Aisha's glance held reassurance, how Zayn's small nods carried quiet encouragement, and it was strange, but comforting to realize that despite everything, some things didn't change, they only became clearer. At lunch, Zayn joined Aisha and me, and the three of us shared small, easy conversations, laughing at awkward school moments, teasing each other lightly, and for the first time since prom night, I felt a genuine ease in my chest, a warmth that wasn't overwhelming but steady, like a candle burning gently in a quiet room. After school, Aisha and I walked home together under the late afternoon sun, her arm brushing mine, her presence a reminder that some bonds aren't broken by chaos but are instead strengthened when tested. And she looked at me with that familiar half-smile, half-serious expression and said, "You're different now, you know." And I realized she was right. I had changed, grown calmer, more patient, more willing to see the good even when things went wrong, and I smiled at the thought, feeling proud of the person I was becoming. Later that evening, Zayn texted me to see if I wanted to meet at the park, and walking there under the soft glow of streetlights, the crisp night air brushing against my face, I felt anticipation mixed with comfort because now I knew these interactions weren't chaotic. They were real, grounded, and honest. We walked together slowly, talking about everything and nothing, sharing fears and dreams, small victories and private jokes, and I realized how rare it was to find someone who simply listened, who made me feel understood without judgment. And when we parted that night with a quiet, sincere, "I'm glad we're friends," I felt a sense of calm settle deep inside me, the kind that comes when you know you've survived something difficult and come out stronger. The days that followed were filled with small, meaningful moments, Aisha and I planning a school event together, laughing over every tiny mistake, Zayn occasionally joining us with easy smiles, subtle jokes, and shared silences that felt comfortable rather than awkward. And slowly, the memory of heartbreak, confusion, and betrayal from prom night faded into something softer, something that no longer hurt but reminded me of what mattered most: trust, loyalty, and the courage to see the truth even when it was painful. By the weekend, as I sat on my bed looking at candid photos of our group, the chaotic, unforgettable prom night felt less like an ending and more like the beginning of understanding the true meaning of friendship and the delicate beauty of young love. The kind that isn't perfect, isn't easy, but is real, resilient, and unforgettable in ways that last long after the lights go out and the music fades. The weeks after prom passed with a quiet intensity, each day adding small but meaningful moments that made me realize just how much life could shift after one unforgettable night. Monday mornings became a little easier because I no longer woke up with that tight, nervous feeling in my chest. Instead, I felt a calm awareness that came from knowing I had survived emotional chaos and come out stronger. Aisha and I fell into our old rhythm effortlessly, walking into class together, whispering jokes and sharing stolen snacks, and occasionally exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. Zayn continued to show up in unexpected ways, sometimes a text asking for help with homework, sometimes a quiet hey at lunch that made my heart flutter in a gentle, steady rhythm. And each encounter reminded me that real connections don't always need fireworks. Sometimes they're built in laughter over small things, in shared silences, and in the trust that develops when someone consistently shows up for you. One Wednesday after school, Aisha and I stayed late to finish decorating the auditorium for the upcoming school talent show. And as we worked, we laughed at how clumsy we were, tangled in strings of fairy lights, and at one point I caught Zayn standing in the doorway, holding a box of decorations, watching us with a small, shy smile. That moment felt cinematic, like life had paused briefly to let me notice the people who truly mattered. We invited him over to help, and the three of us spent the next hour untangling lights, swapping stories about past performances, and joking about who would inevitably trip on stage. By the time we finished, the hall looked magical, softly lit with warm yellow lights and twinkling fairy lights, shadows dancing on the walls, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of the prom night drama lift completely, replaced with something lighter: belonging, trust, and quiet joy. Weekends became even more special because Aisha, Zayn, and I started doing small things outside school. Going for walks around the neighborhood park, grabbing milkshakes at the diner nearby, and occasionally sneaking into the old library after hours to talk about books, dreams, and everything we were afraid to share with anyone else. During those walks, I noticed how easy it was to just be myself. How Zayn's presence no longer made my chest tight with anxious anticipation, but instead filled me with warmth. And how Aisha's laughter could still make my heart feel full even after everything that had happened. One Friday evening, we found ourselves sitting on the swings at the park, the soft glow of streetlights casting elongated shadows across the empty playground, and for the first time, I allowed myself to reflect on prom night not with anger or betrayal but with understanding. the chaos, the misunderstanding, and the heartbreak had taught me that people who truly care will always find a way to protect and support you, even if their methods seem confusing at first. By the second week, I started noticing subtle changes in myself. I was more patient, more confident in speaking up, and less afraid of being vulnerable. At lunch, I found myself laughing at small jokes with Zayn and Aisha, feeling completely present in the moment rather than trapped in my thoughts or worries about what others thought. When a new student joined our table, instead of feeling nervous or jealous, I felt a quiet pride in the relationships I had built, and the trust that had survived even the most dramatic test of all, prom night. One evening, as the golden light of sunset spilled across my room, I realized that the lessons I had learned weren't just about friendship or trust. They were about resilience, understanding, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly are rather than what circumstances might suggest. By the end of the month, our little group had created a rhythm of friendship and connection that felt almost unshakable. Aisha, Zayn, and I became inseparable in our own quiet way, sharing secrets, supporting each other through small personal struggles, and celebrating tiny victories like passing a test or finishing a project. The memory of that chaotic prom night, once so heavy with betrayal and heartbreak, now felt like a turning point. A reminder that real relationships aren't flawless or easy, but they are built through honesty, forgiveness, and the willingness to show up even when the world seems against you. One evening, as I lay on my bed looking at candid photos from that month, the soft smiles, the laughter, the late-night talks under dim lights, I understood something deeply. Life doesn't hand out perfect moments, but it does give you messy, beautiful ones, and if you have the courage to trust, forgive, and embrace them, those moments become unforgettable. As the months passed, life settled into a comforting rhythm, but the experiences of prom night and the weeks after it left a permanent mark on the way I approached friendships, trust, and feelings. Each morning at school, the sunlight spilling into the hallways no longer made me anxious. Instead, it highlighted the subtle connections that had grown stronger over time. Aisha and I laughed easily again, our inside jokes flowing naturally, our whispered comments during class no longer shadowed by uncertainty, but by the kind of camaraderie that comes from surviving something together. Zayn too became an integral part of this rhythm. Not just a crush, not just a friend, but someone whose presence made ordinary days feel warmer, lighter, and more significant. We shared small gestures, a hand on a shoulder, a quiet smile across the cafeteria, a shared laugh in the hallway, that were loaded with meaning, because every moment now was underscored by the understanding that honesty and trust had been tested and survived. One crisp Saturday afternoon, Aisha suggested we explore the nearby woods behind the school, claiming there was a hidden pond she had discovered months ago. The three of us walked together, kicking fallen leaves along the trail, teasing each other as we stumbled over roots and rocks, and for a while, it felt like the world had shrunk down to just the three of us. At the pond, the late autumn sun reflected off the water in molten gold, and I watched as Zayn skipped a stone perfectly across the surface, the ripples distorting our reflections in the water. Aisha laughed at his concentration, and I found myself smiling in a way I hadn't realized I'd been holding back. In that moment, I realized how natural it had become to include Zayn in the rhythm of our friendship, how easy it was to feel comfortable with him without constantly overthinking every gesture, and how much I had grown to trust both him and Aisha, not blindly, but in a measured, genuine way that made me feel secure and understood. The weeks that followed were filled with small, significant milestones. We started planning the school's winter carnival together, and late afternoons turned into evenings of laughter, decorating, and shared secrets. Zayn and I began texting more, sharing music playlists, little life updates, and funny memes that made me laugh even on the worst days. Aisha, always observant, occasionally nudged me with subtle hints, teasing me about my growing comfort and connection with Zayn, and I found myself blushing and laughing, appreciating how she had always been the bridge between me and the people I cared about most. One rainy afternoon, we found ourselves trapped under the school awning while waiting for rides home, and we huddled together, shoulders brushing, sharing stories about our dreams, fears, and the awkward realities of high school life. And in that confined, wet, quiet space, I realized how intimate trust and friendship could feel without a single dramatic gesture. Simply being present, listening, and showing up consistently. By the time winter break arrived, I felt a sense of stability and warmth I hadn't known before. Zayn had become someone I relied on emotionally, someone whose laughter, patience, and quiet understanding made ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Aisha remained my anchor, the friend who had risked everything to protect me, the one whose loyalty and insight shaped my understanding of trust and forgiveness. During the winter carnival, as we watched the snow fall from the brightly lit school gym, sharing hot cocoa and stories, I realized that the chaos of prom night had not only strengthened my relationships but had also taught me how to navigate my own emotions, how to hold space for the people I loved, and how to embrace vulnerability without fear. Even after the winter break, the months continued to layer experiences and memories on top of one another. There were small conflicts, moments of jealousy or misunderstanding, but none of them carried the weight of prom night, because I now understood the difference between surface-level drama and true emotional bonds. Aisha, Zayn, and I continued to navigate high school life together, supporting each other through exams, family stress, and social pressures, each day reinforcing the lessons of trust, forgiveness, and resilience. By the time the first snow melted into early spring, I looked back at that unforgettable prom night not as a moment of betrayal, but as the crucible that had forged stronger friendships, a deeper connection with Zayn, and a clearer understanding of my own heart. One quiet spring evening, as I walked home alone from the park where Zayn had promised to meet me, I paused to look at the glowing horizon, feeling an almost surreal sense of peace. The months of chaos, heartbreak, and uncertainty had taught me that life isn't about perfect moments. It's about messy, beautiful, honest ones, moments that challenge us, shape us, and ultimately reveal the people who truly matter. And in that knowledge I felt a quiet, steady happiness. I had survived the storm of prom night, strengthened the people I cared about most, and learned that trust, forgiveness, and love, whether romantic or platonic, are the forces that turn unforgettable chaos into unforgettable memories.